think you should be.
Hey guys, this is a quick legend overview and the ranking system that I'm going to give them. So looking over at S tier, this is the brokenly overpowered. They just ruined the game. It is above and beyond broken. Luckily no legends fit into this category. As for A tier, this is easily one of the best. They are not overpowered, but they're good in all respects, and you'll see them in ranked pubs, high-level tournaments. You'll see them everywhere. These are the best of the best legends. B is they're strong in some respects. They're good at what they do. They could use a little bit of tweaks and things like that to bring them up into the great category, but where they sit at B, there's nothing really wrong with them. They don't need a change. C category is these are the average, the fair characters. You can use them for pubs. You probably won't see them in too many tournaments. They're not the best, but they work. They do what they're supposed to do. Slight tweaks here and there, and they'll be in a good spot. D tier is a really poor design, and especially one aspect of the character. They're lacking. They're just not where they need to be. And it's a really fine line between D and A tier. The legends in this game are actually balanced extremely well, and nobody fits into S, like I said before, and nobody fits into F. F is absolute trash can, unusable. They are just worthless as a legend. Luckily, nobody fits into that category, and so this is where they fit. Okay, looking at ranking the legends, let's start with Bloodhound. He used to be down here in F, but he's been buffed, so we're actually going to put him into C. He's a pretty solid, fair character. He's not awful. Let's go into Gibraltar. Gibraltar, A tier. He's easily become one of the best due to all these buffs. He's a fantastic legend. He's got so much health, and he's seen in all sorts of tournaments. Now, Wraith, I'm actually going to put at B tier. She used to be A tier, but all these slight tweaks have brought her down. And same thing with Pathfinder and his recent grapple nerf. I'm going to bring him down to B tier. He's not quite as good as he used to be. Octane, I've fallen in love with him recently. He's been my favorite, but he is underpowered. On to Bangalore. She actually also receives A tier next to Gibraltar. She's a solid pick. Crypto, we can just toss him in there with Bloodhound. He works, he does his thing. He's just not the greatest. Now Mirage. Mirage has received a huge buff, and he's actually an A tier now. Looking into Loba, she's D tier. A lot of people are going to disagree with that, but I'd suggest checking out the video as to why. Revenant is also C tier there with Bloodhound. He does what he does. He's, solid. Lifeline, I'm also going to put in this category as well. I think she needs that rework, and she'll be fine. Now, Watson and Caustic will both be put into B tier, because you'll see them everywhere, and they've become more and more viable because they're more and more valuable to your team. And team play has become more and more of a thing with skill-based matchmaking and all that. So that's where I will rank everyone. If you want to know why, check out the videos below or keep watching. Okay, so you have seen how I've ranked the legends and what tier I have given them. If you want to see why, let me give you a quick overview. So on the left, you'll see the legend. I'll have their name, clearly written up above. And then I've got three categories for the tactical, 3 categories for the ultimate. And as you'll see, they're both the exact same. It is a 0, a +1, a +2, or a +3. And the categories are the same. And it's movement and repositioning, engagement and retreat, and then teamwork, because it is a team game. So the first category, movement and reposition, is basically how you can get into a fight or position yourself to get ready for a fight, and like rotations, like how to rotate into next circle, things like that. Engagement and retreat is engaging in the fight and retreating from the fight while they're actually happening. So you've already been shooting at somebody and they're going to come after you, so you use your lifeline heal drone to help you, so that would give you points, or you use a caustic bag to help you, As far as teamwork, that's something that your tactical would help you do to help your team. So you're Bloodhound and you scan the enemies before you engage. That is good for teamwork. Same rules apply to the ultimate, and it has movement, reposition, engagement, retreat, and teamwork. Those are the best titles I could come up with. If you actually watch each legend individually, you'll see why I rank them as those levels. For passive, I didn't feel that they fit into those three categories, so the passive either gives you an advantage or it helps your team in some way. And those are also ranked from 0, 1, 2, or 3. And then over in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll get an overall score. And these scores obviously correlate to where you rank on the tier list. So let's just jump right in. Bloodhound has gone from absolutely worthless to a solid overall pick. They've tweaked him in small increments and eventually brought him up to be a solid legend choice. He'll end up with an overall score of 11 and actually end up in the C category, and here's why. Alright, to start off with Bloodhound, we got his tactical. You press a button and it scans stuff. I'm not exactly going to go into in-depth on how to use it or what they do. That's for a different video. As far as movement and repositioning, you can scan, but the enemies are alerted, and this doesn't exactly give you an advantage in any way, helping you get to a different spot. So Bloodhound gets a 0 for this category. As far as engagement and or retreat, if you're fighting an enemy and you scan them, you know when they're coming around the corner. That gives you an advantage. If you're about to engage in a fight, you can scan an enemy team and know where their caustic traps are, know where the Watson fences are, know what's going on. You might even be able to catch a third party off guard. So he doesn't get a perfect 3 because the other enemies are alerted of this scan. So we'll put him at a 2 for this category. As far as teamwork goes, this is a 3. This helps everybody on your team. Everybody knows what's going on in a situation. If you roll up into a fight, this is a great teamwork ability. For his ultimate, we got the movement and repositioning. Because they have buffed Bloodhound a lot over the seasons, he gets a 2 for this category. He has plenty of speed and plenty of time to use this. The reason it's not a perfect 3 is because some people don't like the field of view change and the grayscale. You're also quite loud in this, so enemies can hear you coming if they're paying attention. So for this, we'll put him at a solid 2. For engagement and retreat, this gives you incredible strafe speed, and it's a solid 2. The reason it's not a 3 is because, again, you're very loud and a good player can hear you coming, and some people get thrown off by the strafe speed. So for this, we'll keep him at a 2. As far as teamwork, this ultimate helps your team in no way whatsoever. This is purely for your engagement and movement and repositioning. This does not help your team. Bloodhound's passive. As far as Bloodhound's passive goes, you could understand that people have been in a fight, so it's not a 0. His ability does give you some sense of direction. It's just barely there, so we'll give him a +1 on that one. As far as teamwork goes, he can mark these things and let his team know that there have been enemies in the area. So, again, we'll give him a +1. This will give Bloodhound an overall score of 11. With this overall score of 11, Bloodhound will be placed into the C category. He's good at some things, but not other things. He's, above average. He's not in critical condition like he was before. He's a viable pick, maybe not for ranked, but for pubs, he's definitely an average pick. As far as Bloodhound buffing him, I think that most characters in this game should hover around that C to B tier area that we've established. And with Bloodhound, the only advantage that I think would do him any good is changing his passive. His passive seems to be relatively weak and not that useful. So if Bloodhound's ever to receive any sort of additional buff or increase I believe it should be to his passive. In my mind, a better passive for Bloodhound would be if he shoots an enemy, all their footsteps are tracked and marked. So during Bloodhound's ultimate, you can see red footsteps while an enemy is running. I would prefer that his passive would be that. So if you wound an enemy, you can always see their footsteps where they're going, or at least for a limited duration. That way Bloodhound could be a true tracker, and that way you could poke shots and then let your team know where an enemy is going, or if you've wounded them. Then you can also ping that and let your team know that there's a wounded character over there. So if Bloodhound's to get a buff in any respects, I think it would be in that. Other than that, I think he's a solid pick, and he's well balanced where he's at. Gibraltar looking kind of thick. Also, he's just a freaking tank, and probably one of the best legends, and since his recent buffs, he's seen in all tournaments, all competitive play, and he's a high tier pick and easily one of the best, and here's why. The big boy, his tactical will actually be a +3 on movement and reposition. Most of you are sitting here wondering, how is that even possible? Well, his dome shield can claim an area, it can help your team rotate, it blocks all the incoming damage, it allows fast heals for your team, it allows a fast pickup, it is an amazing tool for repositioning. It lets you claim an area or rotate safely, and you can hold a position. So in all actuality, his dome shield is a fantastic tool for repositioning and setting up for a rotation. As far as engagement and retreat scenarios, Gibraltar's dome shield will get us a +2. It has fast heals, and it can help us retreat in a fight or before an engagement, take over an area and claim it for our team. The reason it's not a perfect 3 is because it is quite obvious if you're retreating where the dome shield is, and it's not a perfect 3 in regards that any enemy team can come into the dome and take it over or use it against you. But it is still extremely valuable, so for that we'll give it a +2. Teamwork, this gets an absolute +3 in every regards. This helps your teammates all getting fast heal. This protects all of your teammates. This can, again, like I said, claim areas for your team or help you rotate. This is an exceptional tool and one of his best abilities. Alright, for Gibraltar's ultimate, we'll look into movement and repositioning. You can do it. You can reposition with this ultimate, but most people can get under a small crevice or in a house and negate its damage, and it's not a wide area. So as far as rotating, repositioning, and things like that, we'll give his ultimate a +1 here. It's still useful, just not the best. As far as engagement, retreating, or starting a fight, something like that, this ultimate is extremely strong because mid-fight, when this is dropped, you can do extremely heavy damage to an enemy. You could argue this would be only +2, but I would say it's a +3 just because of how heavy damaging this can be and how often it's used in a good fight. As far as teamwork, this really doesn't help the team that much at all. It can stun people, but Bangalore also does that, and probably more effectively over a wider area. So for teamwork, we'll just give him a +1 in this category. On to Gibraltar's passive. Gibraltar, by far, has a fantastic passive. He has 30% damage reduction for being fat, which I think is an atrocity and a terrible aspect of the game and should be removed. Something about hitboxes and people being terrible at aiming. Regardless, his passive also includes a gun shield, which is a free 50 health every time he aims down sights, and it just reactivated every fight. There's no real cooldown timer, there's no needing to shield it, no needing to really manage it. It just kind of happens for you, and it gives you a huge advantage in most gunfights. It can give you an advantage in long-range sniper battles. It can give you an advantage in close-range SMG battles. It's a fantastic tool. As far as helping his team, it does nothing. It is solely for him. This will leave us with an overall score of 17 for Gibraltar. This is an extremely high score because he is an extremely valuable legend. You'll see him in a lot of competitive ranked games. Because of these recent buffs, he is by far one of the best legends, if not the best legend. How would I change Gibraltar? As far as Gibraltar goes, honestly, he could use a bit of a nerf. I know in Season 5 they changed how often he could use his Dome Shield, which was a pretty sizable hit. But for me, I think that they should remove his fast pickup. I don't think that that's necessary for him to have that in the game. That should be Lifeline Steal as a combat medic. I don't think that's a needed addition to Gibraltar's kit. I think he works fine without it, and he's still valuable to the team without it. I think that the fast pickup should just be removed from the game, and Gibraltar would come down a step, but still be a strong overall pick and a balanced legend. Wraith, the best legend in the game by some regards, especially when the game came out. Now, I know a bunch of you are already looking in the bottom right-hand corner at the overall score of 13 and asking why. So, well, let's get into it. For her tactical movement and repositioning, she can rotate out of storm and out of bad situations. She can get in and out of things pretty well. We'll give this a solid 2 because it's a very useful tactical. As far as engagement and retreat, it doesn't necessarily help in engagement, but a Wraith phase will get you out of a fight almost 9 out of 10 times. This ability is extremely effective, easily one of the best in the games, and this is why they keep nerfing this specific ability of her, because this is her bread and butter. This is her key to survivability in this game, and it allows her to just reset, reposition, and heal. This is a fantastic ability. So for this, we're going to give it a +3. As far as teamwork goes, this is a 0, possibly even a -1, because we've all had it where a Wraith teammate will just phase out and leave you. This does not help your team in any way whatsoever. Ultimate. Wraith's ultimate is fantastic for movement and reposition, especially in high-level ranked games and intense games. The ability to just transport between one house to the other without being on a zip line, without being on a jump pad, not exposed, to just move your entire team from point A to point B, fantastic. So for this, we're going to give her a +3. As far as engagement and retreating goes, I'm going to give this a 0, because if you push a fight with the Wraith portal, then the enemy knows where you are. They're going to shoot you. As far as retreating goes, most of the time they can just take the portal, and unless you're doing some advanced strategies or you're really working with your team, then they're not going to come through. This really won't help you with that fight. You can't activate your ult during the fight. It'll kill you. So for this, we're going to give her a 0. As far as teamwork goes, this ultimate's going to get a +3 because, again, this can transport your team back and forth, and the audible sound of an enemy taking it. This really helps your team just move around and get from point A to point B, and almost always works in your advantage. So for now, we'll give it a +3. Wraith's passive. As far as Wraith's passive goes, we're just going to give her a +1 for personal advantage, because knowing that somebody's aiming at you, it helps, but in most games you can generally tell where the enemy is. So it is used in those few moments, and it only gives you a slight advantage in my opinion, because the reaction time needed is usually just not applicable here. As far as teamwork goes, you can alert your team that there is an enemy looking at you, which is beneficial in some ways, so we can give her a +1 in the passive rank as well. Wraith's overall score will end up being a 13. Now, at a score of 13, this will put Wraith into the B category. She's a strong legend in pretty much all regards. She has her weaknesses, obviously, especially with the 5% damage increase on her. Wraith could use a buff, actually, in terms of buffing or nerfing her. I believe that her tactical should be changed back to the way it was in like Season 2. Not Season 1. Season 1 was much too powerful. Her portal should be able to go further, and I don't think it should be destroyed in Storm. These consistent small nerfs to Wraith are actually adding up and making her less and less viable. And personally, I think they should try to keep the legends the same and bring other legends up to that level, rather than taking away an ability that they've already had predetermined and set up, in most cases anyway. But she's a strong overall pick and has been since the beginning of the game. She's a good legend to pick. You'll see her in ranked and high-level tournaments. You'll see her everywhere, even in pubs. She's a good legend. It's Pathfinder, everybody's favorite robot. Easily one of the best in the game at one point, but that was due to technical reasons of a hitbox issue. As far as Pathfinder's overall score goes, we'll get into that. Tactical. Pathfinder's movement and reposition on his tactical is probably the best in the game. The ability to just fling yourself into crazy positions, to send on a team, to just get you super far distances and just keep that movement speed up, make you a hard target to hit. Fantastic. Pathfinder gets an easy +3 here. As far as engagement and retreat, we're only going to give him a +2 because it doesn't work all the time. If an enemy sees you grapple, they know generally where you're going, and they can pick you out of the sky if they have great aim. Also, it does make an audible sound alerting the enemy that you are grappling, and it's not the best tool to use mid-fight. So for this, we're just going to give him a +2 and leave it at that. For teamwork, his grapple does nothing for his team. This does not support them in any way or help them in any way, so he gets a 0 in this category. As far as Pathfinder's ultimate, again, it's a +3. It isn't a +2 because you are on a zipline, which makes you an easy target, but with the meta being people zip jumping and strafing on the zip lines, it's very easy to avoid it, and sometimes can be even harder to hit on a zip line than in a regular standing gunfight. As well as his zip line can go anywhere. Unlike Octane's ultimate, it can only go to a certain limit. Pathfinder's ultimate is by far much more versatile. His ultimate doesn't help you really win a fight, engagement, retreat. If you're low, if somebody's pushing you, his ultimate can't help you in any way here, so we're going to give this one a 0. Teamwork, it's a +3 because everybody on the team can use this and reposition and just use it to its advantage. It's an extremely valuable tool to help teams rotate to get to better positioning, so for this, we're going to give him a +3. For Pathfinder's passive, his personal advantage is a 0. This really doesn't help him in any way. He might be able to get a ring position, but this is more of a teamwork-oriented passive. So for this, he gets a +1. And the reason it's only a +1 is because I feel like most teams can see the storms coming. They can generally find the location. This passive isn't extremely valuable in any regards, so we're just going to give it 1 point on teamwork. This will lead us to an overall score of 12 for Pathfinder. Now this also puts Pathfinder into the B category. He's right there with Wraith as a strong pick, used in high-level gameplay all the time. He can be used very effectively. In my opinion, still not one of the best legends, especially with this recent nerf to his grapple cooldown, which makes his tactical, I believe, 35 seconds. So, moving on to how I would change Pathfinder. Pathfinder is, I think, finally balanced where he is. His hitbox is fixed, his issues are all worked out. The only thing I would change is this Season 5 recent update has made his grapple, I believe, 35 seconds. That is far too long. I agree that I think it was 12 seconds is too soon, but 35 is quite a step up in nerfing him because his tactical is one of his main tools. So if they adjust that, maybe change it to 15, 20, somewhere in there, I think Pathfinder is a solid legend in a B tier category with a great pick rate and a great legend to choose. An overall solid pick. Octane. Octane has recently become one of my favorite legends. Just in these last few seasons, I've been using him, and I was really hoping that he would get a buff in Season 5. Sadly, that is not the case, and we actually end up with a pretty low overall score for Octane, and here's why. Tactical. Octane's tactical movement and reposition, I'm only going to give him a 1 here, because when stimming, you lose health, there's an audible cue for the enemies to know where you are, and this really doesn't give you much in the way of an advantage, only is in speed. So for here, I can give it a +1, maybe a +2, but repositioning and rotating, and I only see it as a +1 here. As far as engagement and retreat, I'm going to give him a +2. And the reason it's not a +3 is because you lose health, the audible cue that the enemy can hear. So for those, it knocks it down to a 2. But having that increased strafe speed or increased speed to run away or to engage in a fight, that's a fantastic thing, and that really helps with Octane. So for that, we'll give him a +2. As far as teamwork, the stim does nothing to help your team. It is solely for your purpose, and so there, we'll give it a straight 0. Octane's ultimate. So movement and reposition, we can't give it a +3, so we're going to give it a +2. A +3 would mean that it works in all regards, and it's very good and one of the best. But for Octane, his ultimate, it's very easy to see as if you're an enemy, and it's extremely easy to shoot them down. The way you go off the bounce pad is extremely predictable. If anything, it's very damaging when pushing an enemy unless they're unexpecting it. But then there's an audible sound that lets the enemy know you're coming. As far as engagement and retreat, I'm going to give him a 0 here just because I don't find that it's all that useful. You could give him a +1 and argue that he's a level 10 and overall score, but to me, his ultimate's really weak right now, especially for if you're running away from a fight. Bounce pad isn't really going to save you. They're still going to be able to track you and shoot you. It's quite predictable. As far as teamwork, I'm going to give this a +1. Pathfinder's ultimate can get you into places much better. Wraith can move you secretly and safely and securely. This one, I'm going to give it a +1 here. I feel like his ultimate could use some rework, if anything, if they're going to change on him, but we'll get into that later. Octane's passive. 3, +3. Octane, the ability to heal himself slowly, I find phenomenal. Some people could argue that you should knock this down to a +2 because his passive kind of cancels out with his tactical because it takes away his health. But to me, I find it so useful when you're in an intense situation or a fight that you're slowly regaining health. You don't always have to constantly use syringes and other things to bring yourself up to max health. You just eventually get there, and I think this is fantastic. As far as teamwork, this doesn't help them in any way. So sadly, overall score for Octane is a 9. He's going to be a D-tier legend. I think he's slightly underpowered and could use a bit of a rework. For Octane's rework, I would change his ultimate and or his passive. I think his ultimate should give you some sort of health, maybe health boost when you take it, so that way it counters out his stim, or he can go further when using his bounce pad and his stim, or he can ADS in the air and not have the terrible accuracy debuff. Maybe his bounce pad could go higher and further. Something here could work really well for teamwork. If you all hit the bounce pad and gain an extra 25 shield, that'll give you a huge advantage in pushing an enemy team. And I think that's fairly reasonable considering Revenant's ultimate and the way it works. So something with his ultimate, maybe his passive. His passive is pretty helpful for him, and I find that it works just fine. I have seen some things online that say that his passive should be he never gets slowed, as in heavy bullets, caustic traps, Watson fences, he can't be slowed. And I think that would be a huge buff and change possibly even ranked play, with an Octane being able to push into a fight and just shut down an enemy team even if they have Watson fences. So he could still take the damage, but being able to just push into the room and take over an area would be a huge plus for him, and that could move him into the B, possibly even A category. Bangalore, the super soldier with an excellent tactical and a high overall score, which I will put into A category, and here's why. Bangalore has a fantastic tactical if you're looking at the stats right now. Movement and reposition, you can put down a smoke at almost any time, covers a huge area, allows you and your teammates to rotate. You have 2 of them in reserve, and you can cover a huge area. This causes mass confusion, and that'll lead us into engagement and retreat. If you have a digi threat, you can just smoke and run up on somebody. You can retreat and get away. The reason it's not a perfect 3 here is because, again, the enemy can have a digi threat. Teamwork, I'm going to give it a +2 because you can hurt your teammates if they don't have a digi threat or they don't know the smoke is coming. An enemy could have it. So for here, we'll give it a +2. But overall, Bangalore's tactical is a fantastic tactical. And in my opinion, I think it redefines the game. It's one of, if not the best tacticals in the game. It's ridiculous. Another reason Bangalore's tactical is one of the best in the game is because she's one of the few legends that can use her tactical while healing. Most legends can't do that. I think the only other legend that can use their tactical and heal is Lifeline and maybe Revenant. Other than that, Bangalore is in a class of her own with her tactical. It redefines the game and how it's played. Ultimate. Bangalore's ultimate is actually surprisingly pretty good. It's received a bit of a buff recently, and as far as movement and reposition, this is a huge repositioning tool. This can blink at a huge area and cause teams to move out of their selected locations. It can stun them, and it's a good tool for repositioning or getting out of a fight. Which brings us to engagement and retreating. If you stun somebody with a Bangalore ultimate, there's a small chance that they're coming back. They're not going to be able to fight that. You can retreat and throw it. You can throw it and then third party. It's a fantastic tool, but the reason I'm not going to give it a +3 here is because it's quite avoidable, actually. It doesn't take much, just a rock, a ledge, a house, a doorway, and you can usually avoid her ultimate pretty effectively. As far as teamwork, I'm only going to give this a +1 because this does not show your teammates if anybody is stunned by your Bangalore ultimate. It does, in fact, stun them as well, which hurts a lot, so we're going to bring it back even further. So a 1 is where we're going to put this for teamwork. It's not the best. Bangalore's passive is phenomenal. Again, a +3. As her passive, she gains the speed that Octane has, and he has to use a tactical and lose health for that. She just has an insane strafe speed, and it's just activated on a whim, no ability needed, no thought. She has a fantastic personal advantage, and this can help her in so many situations and fights. As far as teamwork goes, her passive doesn't help them at all. It's solely for her benefit, and this will bring Bangalore to an overall score of 16. Bangalore's overall score of a 16 will put her into the A category, meaning that she's strong in all respects and in all areas is a solid all-around pick. As far as Bangalore goes, I think she's a perfectly well-rounded character, and she really doesn't need a buff, a nerf, or anything. She's extremely strong where she is in some respects. She's not the best, but I think she's perfectly viable in the meta right now, and I don't think she needs any changes whatsoever. She's a strong pick. You'll see her in ranked. You'll see her in tournaments. She's a good character to have on your team and a good overall pick. Crypto is a great player for team composition, but a poor solo choice. He ends up with a decent overall score because he's very valuable to the team, and we'll give him a 10. Here's why. Crypto's tactical, let's go with movement and reposition. This does nothing. You cannot reposition with this. It really doesn't help you gain any advantage in movement. For this, he gets a straight 0. It's quite obvious why. As far as engagement and retreat, I'm going to give it a +1 because if your drone is up, then you have a perfect ping on where the enemy is, which can give you an advantage and can cause some distraction, and you can even pick up teammates' banners. So it's not the best for during fight. You can't really use his tactical to get out of a situation, to heal you, to survive in any way. But he does have a few advantages, so we'll give him a +1 here. As far as teamwork goes, we're going to give him a +2 because being able to ping enemies is fantastic for your team. You can roll up, and the reason it's not a perfect 3 is because the drone is quite audible and still easily destroyed. I think it's fine where it is. Could use a little bit less health, maybe to make it less annoying, and a little bit shorter recall time. But other than that, his tactical seems pretty decent. Crypto's ultimate. His ultimate does not allow you to move or reposition. It really doesn't help your team rotate in many ways. Effectively here, we'll give it a 0. As far as engagement and retreat, we're going to give this a +2. This is a great tool for when fighting, to be able to pop this ultimate and stun an enemy team, knock down their shields. You can roll up on a third party. You can even just EMP on a third party and then clean up the rest. This EMP is a highly effective tool, but the reason we're not going to give this a +3 is because there's a glaringly obvious indicator that his EMP is about to go off, and if this is used at a certain range, most teams will be able to heal before your team fully engages. It does reset them a bit, but for now we'll give this a +2. So for teamwork, this is obviously a +3. When you EMP a team, you've already knocked half, maybe all, more than half of their shields off, and you have set your team up for an easy third-party squad wipe, or, you can even deactivate traps in a building. This is a fantastic tool for teamwork and allows your team to be very effective. As far as his passive goes, it really doesn't help him at all, because his passive is the pinging from his drone. And while he's using it, it's not that effective to him. Doesn't help him. Teamwork, it's not a perfect 3 because usually he has to be in his drone looking for people, but it does help his team. So for teamwork, we're going to give Crypto a +2. This will bring Crypto's overall score to a 10. With Crypto being an overall score of 10, we'll put him in the C category. He's a strong legend in some respects, and a few things. He's good. You won't see him in many high-ranked games or high competitive tournaments. He's not super effective at any one particular thing. He's more of a nuisance to most enemy teams. Crypto, buff or nerf? That's a hard thing to say. Currently, I think he's pretty well balanced. Personally, like I said before, his tactical, I would decrease the tactical's health, but allow him to redeploy it more often. I think that would allow him to get in and out of fights more often and make the drone less of an annoyance and more of a tactical reposition for finding where the enemy is for your team. I don't know exactly where to buff Crypto. I think he should be slightly better. I'm just not sure where that slight increase should come. Mirage. Well, Mirage has certainly increased in Season 5 in terms of popularity and effectiveness. For his tactical, we'll look at movement and reposition. I'm going to give this a +1 because if you're trying to rotate somewhere, having an exact copy of you is actually quite effective in fooling people, but only for a split second. It doesn't exactly help you move faster, and again, it only helps you for a split second if you fool somebody, and it does alert you of where they're shooting you from. So for this, we're going to give them a +1 here. For engagement and retreating, this is a +3. Now that is a perfect copy of you, this will fool somebody more than half the time. This will always give you the upper hand, the first shot, the first engagement. It's extremely effective in running too, because your clone can just be off somewhere else, mimicking your movements, looking perfectly real, and this will bamboozle the enemies quite effectively. So for this, we're going to give them a +3 here. Teamwork, this ability does not help your team in any way. This is solely for you. So for teamwork, he gets a 0. Mirage's ultimate has been reworked. And so for movement and reposition, we can actually give this a 2. The reason we can give it a 2 is because every 60 seconds, Mirage can use his ultimate. And this can help you rotate because it is quite confusing who is who. The repositioning is not the best, so we're going to knock this down off of a +3. But it is a valid option to rotate to somewhere using your ultimate. So for now, we'll give it a +2. As far as engagement and retreating, we're going to give this a +3. You can almost always win a fight with your Mirage ult up. This is extremely confusing. It turns you invisible, and then there's copies of you all mimicking you. You can just run in and out of your decoy center, and this causes just mass confusion for everybody involved. So this is a fantastic engagement and fighting tool. So for now, we'll give this a +3. As far as teamwork, it doesn't help your team at all, but it does, because with 12, 9, 10, I don't know how many clones there are, but with all your clones running around, this will draw the attention of enemies, of people getting ready to third party. This can actually work in your team's favor, and so for this reason, we'll give them a +1 here. Now down to Mirage's passive. Personal advantage, +3. He can revive invisible, he can respawn invisible. This almost nearly replaces Lifeline. It's quite similar to Gibraltar. Again, I think that should be removed. Gibraltar does not need a fast pickup. This invisibility on knockdown is sometimes helpful, but with picking people up, it saves you and your teammate. So going over to teamwork, I'm going to give this a +3 as well. I mean, this is extremely beneficial to your team. You can revive invisibly. This is, I mean, a better Lifeline in a sense. You could argue that this is a 2 because it's not the most helpful. Gibraltar may be better at picking up. Lifeline might be in some scenarios. But still, regardless, this will bring Mirage to an overall score of a 16. With this overall score of a 16, Mirage will be placed into the A category. Shocking. Mirage has definitely changed from a D tier underpowered category into one of the strongest legends of the game. He's extremely viable. You'll see him in all sorts of ranked games, all sorts of pub games. I haven't seen him in too many tournaments or really high level play, but we might see him soon. I think he's fantastic where he is. As far as buffs and nerfs, I think Mirage's ultimate could use a tweak. Every 60 seconds is far too soon. Limiting his ultimate timer, and I think you've got a perfectly balanced legend that is quite effective at his job, not extremely broken or overpowered, but strong in his own respects, and I think that'll make him a balanced legend. Season 5 brought in Loba. Loba has a tactical, which I will give movement and repositioning a 2. It's not a 3 because it's not the fastest, it's not the quickest. It can help you get into some tricky spots, but Pathfinder's Grapple is much more effective at this, and I would even argue that Bangalore Smoke could be more effective in repositioning than this because of the clear indication of where you're going. As far as engagement and retreat, I'm only going to give this a +1. I do not find this effective for pushing an enemy team. You will be murdered every time. The animation is extremely long. The indication of where you're going is extremely obvious. The bracelet is extremely slow. This does not help you escape fights very often. It definitely doesn't help you push fights. So for this, I'm going to give it a +1. Teamwork. This doesn't help your team at all. This is similar to Pathfinder's Grapple. This is just an ability for you. Loba's ultimate. So movement and repositioning, rotating into storm, high level thought process, 0. It's not effective in any of these categories. So moving on to engagement and retreating. Now this is a +1, but there's a reason for that. You could win a fight with an armor swap. There are some things you could do with this ultimate. It's not the best in any of these regards, so we'll give it a +1 instead of 0. For teamwork, this is a +3. This allows you and your team all to grab loot. This can get your team shields. This can steal things, getting ready for a third party. This is one of the better teamwork ultimates in the game. As far as her passive, personal advantage, I'm going to give this a +2 because on drop, being able to see high tier loot is extremely valuable. The reason I'm not going to give this a 3 is because of the sniper scopes and phoenix kits and all these other worthless items that you'll see littered around the map throughout the game that are distracting and not helpful after a certain period of time. It's useful, so we'll give it a +2, but it's not the best, so we're going to end it there. As far as teamwork goes, your team can't see this. You could ping something for them, but in this game, are you really going to ping the purple shields. You're just going to pick them up yourself. So this will bring Loba's overall score to a 9. Now, most people would be shocked by this, considering how often she's played and where people see her, and she is just the new character in my opinion. So I think she'll be placed in the D tier category as underpowered. I think that Loba could use some buffs, and I think it is strictly her tactical. Instead of nerfing Pathfinder, I think what they should do is buff Loba's tactical. I believe that she should be able to travel further, or she should be able to travel faster. One of those two things would definitely help her engage in fights, because Pathfinder's grapple is a much better tool for distance, for engagement, for disengagement during the fight. His grapple is much better. So if they want us to forget the robot, they better change her tactical and make it useful. Other than that, I feel like she's pretty well balanced in all the other respects. Revenant, the Master of Death and the Shadow Guy. Revenant has definitely had some reworks at the end of Season 4 there, and he is definitely a much better pick overall now, bringing his score to a 10, and here's why. Revenant's tactical does not help his team rotate, doesn't help him rotate. It really doesn't help with any movement aspects, so for this category, we're just going to go straight in and give him a 0. Engagement and retreat. This is actually quite effective, so we're going to give this a +2. It's extremely effective against Gibraltars and Caustics, keeping them from putting down their tacticals or using their passives. The reason I'm not going to give this a +3 is because it's such a small area of effect and it only lasts for a short time. I don't feel that it's perfect. Now that you have 2 charges, it's very good. You could argue that this is a 3, but I just think that it's good where it is, and so I'm going to leave it at a +2. As far as teamwork goes, this actually will give us a +2 as well, because it's not perfect as far as helping your team, but it does help your team, because when an enemy is silenced, a Wraith can't Q, a Gibraltar can't dome, a Caustic can't gas. So you could even argue a +3 here. Revenant his tactical is extremely strong where it is and quite effective, but just not fantastic in any respects. It's a solid tactical. Moving on to Revenant's ultimate. This doesn't help your team reposition. This doesn't help you reposition. Personally, you're always sent back to the totem. Sometimes the totem just stops. An enemy can use your totem against you. I don't find that it's that useful for any repositioning or getting to a certain place. So for that reason, we'll give it a 0 and move on to engagement and retreating. If you engage in a fight in a third party, fantastic way to roll up with an ultimate. As far as a retreat, if you're low health, you can pop his ultimate and guaranteed safety. Now, again, the reason it's not a +3 is an enemy could use it. Sometimes it'll deactivate. It's not the largest area, but it's a solid overall ultimate, so we'll give it a +2. Teamwork, this is a +3 by far. Even when playing with randoms, you can signal that you're pushing just by putting down an ultimate. Everybody on your team can use it. It's extremely effective. It basically saves your teammates from dying. It's a fantastic teamwork tool and really helps your team, especially now that it's been changed to give you more than a sliver of health. Revenant's passive. His passive is not that good. I mean, he can climb faster and higher, but it's by such a small margin that it really only helps him in small certain scenarios and does not help his team in any teamwork whatsoever. This will bring Revenant to an overall score of 10, and this will put him in the C category. He's an okay pick. He's not a high-tier ranked competitive champion. He's not in high-level tournaments. He's not the best, but he's there. He's a decent pick. As far as buffing or nerfing Revenant, his tactical seems plenty fine where it is. His ultimate has been reworked, and any more changes to that, I believe you're getting into overpowered territory. Where I would buff Revenant just slightly is his passive. Maybe give him a slightly faster climbing speed or higher climbing distance. I think this would just slightly push him into the next category and make him a solid all-around pick and decent for some games. I think this would make him a good legend, but other than that, he's fairly well balanced and in a good position right now. Lifeline. Many of you are probably looking in the bottom right-hand corner for this one, saying, why is Lifeline rated quite highly? She seems to be a little bit underpowered, but if you'll let me explain, I think Lifeline's quite good where she is. Lifeline's tactical does not help you or your team reposition, to rotate. It is not good in this respect. So for here, we're going to give it a +0. Engagement and or retreating. This is a +3. You can set this down and help your team. You can heal yourself when somebody's pushing you. You can heal your health while healing your shields. It's extremely effective, and due to this recent nerf where you can't move the health drone, you might be able to push this down to a +2. Personally, I don't think so. I think it's still fine where it's at. I would hope that they add that back in where you can move the health drone. As far as teamwork goes, this is also a +3 because you can heal multiple people at once, and it's extremely effective for when you pick up a teammate off of a revive. You can give them a bunch of health and basically keep them in the fight longer. So we're going to give it a +3 here as well. Lifeline's ultimate does not help you reposition, move, or any sort of advantage like that. Straight 0 here. Engagement, retreat, or help you win a fight. You could get something out of the package, or you could use it as cover. I mean, a +1 is there. You could argue a +0. It's quite ineffective, really, in most scenarios. I might change this to a 0, but for now, we're going to leave this at a +1. Teamwork. A lot of people would say, why is the teamwork only at a 1? Lifeline's ultimate does not help your team effectively. There's such a small amount of loot inside the care package. It usually only benefits one person. People can steal loot from each other. Loba's ultimate is much better at getting loot, and it'll also give away your teammate's position. So teamwork is a +1 for now, but it's relatively weak. If anything, Lifeline's ultimate is needing a rework. Lifeline's passive. Her passive, fantastic. Probably one of the best in the game, especially with the addition of gold armor, using the shield cells and syringes. 25% faster healing is fantastic. It's very nice to play Lifeline. I think it's one of the better advantages she has as being a pick. The fast heals is really the only reason she's stayed in any light of being a high-picked legend. Teamwork doesn't help your team at all. This will bring Lifeline to an overall score of 11. With Lifeline being an 11, that'll put her in the C tier. She's good in some respects, but I think she could use a slight increase or buff. So, buffing or nerfing Lifeline. I think that Lifeline's ultimate, seen here on this chart, is the thing that needs a rework. Her ultimate really doesn't help her in any scenario, and is quite honestly just not useful. I've played Lifeline many times and just not used my care package the entire game. It's quite ineffective and not useful. To buff Lifeline, don't change anything else. I would personally add back in her Doctrone being able to move around, and then rework her ultimate to be similar to the dummy stay, where it gives your teammates a heal or something of that nature. Her ultimate just needs a rework in general. The care package is just worthless, and her ultimate is room for tons of improvement. So if you guys have any cool ideas or something for Lifeline's ultimate, leave it down in the comments. I'd like to get your opinion, because I really don't have one. I just know that it's her ultimate that is the trouble. So a side grade is right there waiting for her. Caustic has an overall score of 12 and is actually an extremely viable legend. He's become one of the better legends, and he should be seen played more and more as he's become more and more valuable, and here's why. Caustic. His movement and reposition with his tactical will give this a 0. It really doesn't help you. Doesn't smoke enough of an area like Bangalore to help you move. Doesn't help you in any sort of reposition or rotating tools. So 0 here. As far as engagement and retreat, +3. Nobody is pushing a fully caustic building. Nobody is pushing a caustic in his gas. It is extremely annoying. It is extremely effective. He has such an advantage there. +3 here, especially when in a defensive position. Easy +3. As far as teamwork, I'm only going to give this a +1. I know that they did add in that his gas doesn't slow your teammates, but this is really for Caustic to thrive in his own environment, and it's just beneficial that the enemy doesn't push into that area. So for that, teamwork is only going to be a +1. His ultimate, movement and reposition, I'm actually going to give this a +1 because it does cover enough area for you to be hidden, like Bangalore Smoke, and it can push people out of areas and generally deny areas and give you a reposition. It's not the best at it, but it can work. So for this, I'm going to give it a +1. As far as engagement and retreating, fantastic. You can push a fight and drop an ult on people's heads and probably kill everybody on a third party. If somebody pushes your team and you drop an ult, they've got to get out. The only thing that can counter that is another caustic, and then it's just a 1v1. So for that, I'm going to give it a +3. As far as teamwork, I'm going to give this one a +2 because you can generally communicate this. Unlike your traps, they go off whenever an enemy's nearby. You can communicate where your ult's going, what you're doing with it, and it's more effective in general because of its higher damage. So teamwork, I'll give it a +2. On to Caustic's passive. His passive is extremely helpful for him. It's being able to see people affected by his gas. So it's not the best because you can generally see the damage indicators that somebody's in your gas, but it is still very helpful. So for here, we'll give this a +2 in personal advantage. As far as teamwork, this doesn't help your team in any way. This will bring Caustic to an overall score of 12. That's quite high, especially considering that this would put him in the B category along with Wraith. That's right, Caustic has been buffed, and he is now a much better legend to pick. In A tier, he's strong in almost all respects. You'll even see him in some high-level tournaments and some ranked games. He is an effective teammate and an effective shooter simply due to his 30% damage reduction. Caustic has slowly become one of the better legends to pick, sort of a dark horse of tournaments and things, but he is there. As far as buffing and nerfing Caustic, I think he's fine where he's at. Personally, the only thing, I would change is the 30% damage reduction, which is an atrocity to the game that any character should have a different amount of health. I think that that's just lazy implementation of rules and not being able to sort out tacticals, ultimates, and passives and assigning characters unique attributes. Other than that, I think Caustic's a balanced legend right now, and he's in a good spot. Wattson has shaken things up in the ranked meta and completely changed the way that all high-level tournaments and games are played. She's actually an extremely valuable legend to your team and has a pretty high overall score. Not the best for solos, but we're gonna get into her score and why it's a 12. Looking at her tactical, her movement and reposition ability is a straight 0. Her fences cannot help her in any way to rotate. As far as engagement and retreat, I'm actually going to give this a +2. It's not a perfect 3 because it takes time to put the fences down. They're easy to see from enemies and they can be destroyed. But if you can get a fence up, you've got a solid chance of slowing the enemy down or at least giving your team an advantage in some way, which also brings me over to teamwork. It's not a perfect 3 because your team can deactivate it and many enemies can just destroy it, but it does really help your team. If there's a Watsoned off area, you have a good chance of defending that. It makes your position extremely defendable, and it's just good for your team. Caustic gets a 1 because he blinds his teammates, and Wattson we're going to give a 2 because it doesn't really affect her teammates too much. On to Wattson's ultimate. Movement and reposition is actually a +2. Because if you can place your ultimate down, you don't have to reposition most of the time. You get free shields, you're protected from ults, you're protected from grenade spam. You really don't need to have that movement necessity that you do in most situations. With this, you can actually set up a position and stay there. It's not a +3 because it can be destroyed, and movement I feel like is more important. So for that reason, we'll give it a +2. Close to perfect though. As far as engagement and retreat, I'm actually going to give this a +2 as well, because if you have a Watson ult down, you can place fences extremely fast, giving you that protection. It protects you from grenades, and it gives you a slight increase in speed, I feel like, if you're playing Watson. I could be wrong there, but this will also give you shields, and I feel like this can help you really win a fight. So in this scenario, we're going to give this a +2. Teamwork, it's not a +3 because it's a slow healing of the shields and it's in one spot, but it does help your team regain shields, and it helps you lock down a position. Now that you can only have one ult at a time, it's not a +3 for teamwork, so I'm only going to give it a +2 here. Watson's passive. Her passive is relatively unused, but her passive gets her ultimate, so it's very good because her ultimate is her main thing. Her passive is sort of helpful for her, sort of helpful for the team, so we're going to give it a +1 in both of those categories, due to the fact that it can get you your ultimate. This will bring Watson into an overall score of 12. Now, that's a high ranking that puts her in the B category. Now, in this B category, she is alongside Pathfinder, Wraith, and is actually a highly effective legend. You'll see her in a lot of ranked games, almost all, because of how much of a necessity she is. She's in high-level tournaments, and she, again, has changed the way the ranked game is played. So in this regard, she's an extremely valuable legend. Probably not so much for pubs, but again, she gets a high score because of her usefulness for the team. As far as buffing and nerfing, Watson's fine where she is. I don't think there's any change needed. She's good in ranked, and she's strong in her own regards, and bad in other regards, but that's by design. I think Watson's perfectly feasible as a character where she is. Okay, guys, that'll bring us to the end of the video. If you've stuck around, you probably don't have a lot of things to do, or you really like the video. Either way, I appreciate it. And I'm going to leave up on screen my tier list of legends, and I'll let you guys look at it for a second and just tell me what you think about it. Put down in the comments if you agree, disagree, and why. I kind of walked through most of my reasonings. And also, before I forget, all the legend cards I will have linked in the description below for you to click on and look at and agree or disagree with me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and my thoughts. All right, later.